German kids get divided into different schools at the age of 10. American kids have to attend the school that's closest to where they live. And are students pushed to go to college after high school in Germany just as much as in the US? These and more questions about the German and the American education system are what I'm going to try and answer in today's video. We'll talk about the good sides, the bad sides, and just what's different between the US and Germany. Disclaimer, it's a lot. Hallo, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. Today, I'm finally taking the time to talk about a topic that all of us had to deal with for a pretty long time in our lives: school and the education system. Many of you are probably still involved with it, whether it's as students, teachers, or even as parents. There's so much to talk about here, so this is probably going to be a longer video. I'm just going to insert chapters and timestamps down below, but I also definitely won't be able to cover everything in this video. In fact, today I'm going to focus on how the education system is set up overall, and then I'll make a follow-up video where I'll talk about the more lighthearted day-to-day differences at German versus American schools. Josh and I actually also talked about this topic in our most recent Understanding Train Station podcast episode in a more personal and anecdotal way than I'm going to do it here. So that might also be a good tip for you to check out afterwards. If you're interested in the topic, you can find the link up here or in the info box. Now, with that being said, before I dive into this topic, a big shout out to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. I've been using a VPN ever since I moved to the US, and ExpressVPN is the best one I've tried. I actually use it a lot to access German TV channels, whether it's their live streams or also their on-demand program online. The public broadcasting channels in Germany, ARD and ZDF, have some amazing programs, especially when it comes to documentaries and also educational content on current world events that I've been following recently. But that content is usually geo-blocked, meaning you can't access it from countries other than Germany, Austria, and Switzerland in this case. But when I switch my virtual location on ExpressVPN to Germany, I can watch it without a problem. You can also use ExpressVPN to access content that isn't available in your country on Netflix, BBC iPlayer, and many other streaming services. If you use Germany as your location, you can watch Modern Family and How I Met Your Mother on Netflix, for example. That's what I do all the time. But you can also set it to Canada and watch Aquaman, or even Avengers Age of Ultron, which isn't on the American Netflix, just to give you a few examples. It also comes in super handy whenever you're connected to public Wi-Fi. You guys probably know this, but if a hacker is on the same unencrypted network as you, they can steal your personal information pretty easily, and even your internet provider or the admins of the network you're using can see all the sites you're visiting, even if you're on incognito mode. But ExpressVPN reroutes and encrypts your internet connection using the best-in-class encryption. I just did this 2 weeks ago when I went to Florida for a few days. I used ExpressVPN when I logged into the public hotel Wi-Fi and also at the airport because, you know, I log into my email and my YouTube channel, and this way I just feel a lot safer. Now, if you want to get ExpressVPN too, you can actually get 3 months for free, or 3, and you can find out how by visiting expressvpn.com/, or by clicking the link in the description below. So in this video, I'll mainly be talking about school up to 12th or 13th grade respectively. If you want to hear more about the differences at the university level, you can check out one of my very first videos on this channel about college life. The link is down below, or you can just click up here. But, you know, please don't judge my video making skills from back then. Both in Germany and the US, the school system is different from state to state, so it's not organized on the federal level. The US has 50 states and Germany has 16 states, so a lot of the things I'll be saying in this video might be different in other parts of the respective country, but I'll try to make it as representative as possible. I personally went to school in Munich, which is in the state of Bavaria, so that's what my personal experiences are based on. I graduated from a gymnasium with my Abitur degree, and I also got my bachelor's degree in Munich at LMU. In both countries, kids usually start first grade around the age of 6. Some might start a little earlier than that, and some a little later. In the US, however, school in that sense starts before first grade even, in kindergarten, which is the year right before first grade. That's why Americans usually talk about K to 12, which means kindergarten through 12th grade. In Germany, we don't really have a term like that, but whenever people talk of Schule, so school, we refer to anything from 1st to 13th grade. We don't usually use the word Schule when we're referring to a university or other types of school. In those cases, we would probably say Uni for Universität or Berufsschule or other more specific terms. So in the US, kids start kindergarten at the age of 5 usually, and at a lot of schools, kindergarten is actually considered part of elementary school, which usually ends somewhere after 4th or 6th grade. Then most of the time this is followed by a middle school or junior high from grades 6 through 8, and then finally high school, which is 9th through 12th grade. The high school grades are also usually referred to as freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years, so 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and those terms are used for the 4 years at college later on too, which is the standard length of a bachelor's program in the US. Now, in a lot of cases, all of these different schools that the kids go through over time are connected, meaning that kids often attend school with the same people all the way until they graduate high school. In Germany, things are structured a little differently. For one, kindergarten is not part of the school system at all. It's not mandatory for kids to visit, and even though it's the same word, kindergartens in Germany are actually what Americans call preschool, and preschools in Germany, Vorschulen, are what Americans call kindergarten. In Germany, kindergarten is more of a daycare kind of thing where kids can usually go at the age of 3 until they start first grade, and they don't have a set curriculum. US kindergartens, on the other hand, are part of the elementary school, as I just said, and have a curriculum and usually also a classroom, and some schools even have a kindergarten graduation ceremony. So in Germany, school doesn't start until first grade, with elementary school, which goes usually from 1st through 4th grade in most German states. And then after that is where it gets interesting. After elementary school, German kids get separated into 2 or 3 different school types based on their grades. Hauptschule, or in Bavaria also called Mittelschule, is the lowest school type and ends after 9th grade. Realschule is the next highest, which ends after 10th grade. And then there's Gymnasium, which ends after 12th or 13th grade. There have been a few reforms recently with Gymnasium. I personally graduated after 12th grade. And only if you graduate from Gymnasium with a degree called Abitur or Allgemeine Hochschulreife in long, you can attend a university afterwards. Now, most German states have actually established a combined school type that allows students to either get a Hauptschulabschluss or mittlere Reife, like they would at a Realschule. So those states only have 2 different types of schools, the Hauptschule/Realschule type and then the Gymnasium. In Bavaria, we still have the 3 different school types though. Besides that, there are also Gesamtschulen, which are schools that combine all 3 school levels. But even though that was definitely the goal, the model hasn't really been able to replace the other school types. Now, I know that this has already been pretty complicated, but truth is, this is really just the simple breakdown. There are just so many different variations of these systems in the different states, and then there are also things like Förderschulen, for example, that I haven't even mentioned yet. In general, though, most people outside of Germany find it baffling that kids get divided by their academic performance at the age of 9 or 10. And yes, I agree, it's pretty crazy when you're used to other school systems, and there's actually a lot of pressure for many kids for that reason in 4th grade. Not only because of the decision of which school level they'll go to, but also about the school itself, because this is usually when they pick the school that they'll attend until they graduate. So what happens to the kids that aren't that great in math in 4th grade and therefore don't go to a gymnasium after elementary school? The German school system is pretty old and goes back to the 19th century when things weren't exactly targeted towards everyone going to university. That was something that only the intellectuals did at the time. Now, times have changed obviously, but the division in our school system with different focuses has stayed, and while Gymnasium is supposed to prepare students to go to university, Hauptschule and Realschule are targeted more towards people going into trades afterwards. And for that, we have a pretty unique system in Germany called Ausbildungen, Ausbildungen, which can be translated with apprenticeships or vocational training that you need to go through to become a certified professional in a lot of fields. In fact, there really aren't a whole lot of jobs that you can work in Germany without either a college degree or a vocational degree, which is either called Geselle, journeyman, or Meister, master, which is the highest one. An Ausbildung lasts 2.5 to 3 years, and even though you also attend a school during that time, Berufsschule, so like a vocational school, you mainly work at a company or business where you're basically being trained on the job. You'll be making money during that time too, even though it's not a whole lot usually, but it gets more every single year. And then at the end, you'll have to take theoretical and practical exams to get your Gesellen certification. So a lot of people in Germany do apprenticeships. Most of them do it after graduating Haupt- or Realschule, so after 9th or 10th grade at the age of 15 or 16. But people who graduate from Gymnasium oftentimes choose that path too. The numbers have changed a little in the past decade, with the number of college students for the first time ever being higher than the number of Auszubildende, apprentices. In 2012, there were about 2 million apprentices in Germany versus 2.5 million college students. Jobs like hairdressers, nurses, car mechanics, accountants, electricians, bakers, or wholesalers are all professions that require an apprenticeship certificate in Germany, but the list is endless really. Now, what if you're not good at school when you're 10, but you do want to go to university later on because you want to become a doctor or lawyer? Can you still go? Yes, there are different ways to do that. First of all, you can technically work your way up within the different school systems, but it's not really something that the school system focuses on, so it's not very common and there are a lot of obstacles to overcome, such as having to learn another language that wasn't part of your curriculum at the lower school, or having to catch up with a whole year of math or another subject. People who graduate with Mittlere Reife from Realschule can attend schools called Fachoberschulen, for example, that have focus areas such as technology, design, or social work. At those schools, students will attend another 2 years to obtain a so-called Fachabitur, a subject-linked Abitur, which allows them to study at Fachhochschulen, which are universities that offer degrees in more hands-on fields than general universities do. Some of those schools also offer to obtain the regular Abitur by attending the school for a 3rd year. And then, under certain circumstances, people who have an apprenticeship degree and a set amount of years of work experience also have the option to study at a university even if they don't have an Abitur degree. Long story short, there are a lot of ways and options that again differ from state to state, but even though it's possible to change your path after elementary school, it does come with a lot of thresholds for people usually. So as you could probably tell, I personally definitely think that this system comes with some flaws and disadvantages. Kids experience a lot of pressure at a pretty young age, and once you're in one of the school levels, you might get comfortable and might not really have a lot of internal motivation to put in the effort to work your way up, even if a higher school level would be a better fit for you. On the other hand, the German system also has some major advantages though. For example, that kids aren't forced to be in school for 12 years if it's just not something they're good at or interested in. For some kids, it's just a lot more profitable mentally and professionally to start working earlier in life rather than feeling like they need to try and go to college, which is the main narrative in the US. After high school, you're supposed to go to college, if you can get in, and if you can afford it. We'll talk about that in a second. Even though that narrative has become stronger in Germany too, and as I've mentioned, the number of college students has increased a lot in recent years, we still value our apprenticeships a lot, and I actually know many people my age who took that path and are making a lot more money now than many of my friends who went to university, because there's a pretty high demand for skilled labor, and also many of these apprenticeship fields are very profitable actually. Now, when it comes to universities, you might know that we don't have university tuition in Germany at public universities. There's only a few fees of a couple €100 per year, which compared to tuition fees as high as tens of thousands of dollars per year in the US seems amazing. It makes it more accessible for people from lower socioeconomic classes too. That's why people often talk of education in Germany being free. Your education and therefore your career options in Germany don't depend on how much money you have, which in the US on the other hand is a major factor. factor. Both public K-12 school and university are free, and the only thing that matters is your academic performance. That's how it's supposed to be, at least. Now, in reality, of course, your socioeconomic background does affect your academic performance too in a lot of cases, especially at a young age. Kids who don't speak German at home, for example, or whose parents can't help with their homework as much as parents from wealthier families often do, might not perform just as well at the age of 10 as other kids do, and therefore they might not make it into a higher school level, even if they're more intelligent than other kids. And that, in my opinion, is a big flaw of the German education system. I personally think that the whole system should be a lot more flexible and allow people to switch between the different levels more easily, and also actually encourage them to do so. Now, in the US, this is handled differently. All kids attend the same type of school, even though money does play a role as to whether you attend a public or a private school, of course, but besides that, there is no dividing kids into different school levels. However, within the school, there are usually 2 to 3 different levels for each class, and depending on your performance, you'll be able to go into a higher or lower level for each subject, which I personally find a much better way to solve this overall. What's always been baffling to me is that at the end of 12th grade, American students graduate high school just by finishing the school year. So if they pass 12th grade, they receive a high school diploma. In Germany, you have to take pretty big final exams to graduate. They're really important exams in all school types, but especially the Abitur exams in Gymnasium are considered the most important exams of your life for many people, and they make a major part of your final grade, which is crucial to get accepted to certain university programs. In the US, students usually take the SAT or the ACT tests towards the end of high school, usually in 11th grade, which are huge tests too, and those are usually one of the main factors when applying to universities. They're private, standardized tests that cost around $100. Many schools pay for them though, but they're separate from your high school grade, and you can technically retake them as many times as you want, which is not the case for the German final exams. In some American states, students do have to pass so-called high school graduation tests in order to graduate, but those are usually taken in 10th grade, so 2 years before. They aren't very challenging, and students get several chances to pass too. It turned out that those tests didn't really bring a lot of advantages with them though, which is why many states have discontinued them, and only 11 of 50 states have them in place today. Now, one of the main questions that I get asked a lot is whether we have private schools and boarding schools in Germany. The answer is yes, we do. However, they don't play as big of a role in Germany as they do in the US, and we don't really speak of having a public school system and a private school system. Currently, it's about 9% of the German K-12 schools that are private, but they're becoming more popular every year. From my personal experience though, going to a public school really is the standard in Germany. They're free and they're considered to provide quality education all over the country, so it's not necessarily like in the US, where in a lot of regions public schools have a pretty bad reputation and only private schools are considered the good ones. In the US, 25% of all K-12 schools are private, which means that they're funded through tuition and donations, and the average tuition for private schools in the US goes from around $5,000 to like $20,000 a year. In Germany, even private schools aren't nearly as expensive. They cost around 250 to 300 euros per month on average, which is much lower than 5,000 per year. Most of them actually receive 2/3 of their funding from the government, and only the remaining parts have to be raised through tuition. Religious private schools are oftentimes supported by the connected church though, so that students don't have to pay any tuition at all, and a lot of other private schools try to scale the tuition money based on household income to make it more fair and accessible. Now, going back to the US, the vast majority of private schools are actually religious schools here, 78% to be precise. I have a lot of American friends who went to a Christian or Catholic school, but there are also Baptist schools, Jewish schools, and other ones. What's interesting about this is that while in the US, it's only the religious schools that have religion classes, we actually have religion classes at all public schools in Germany. In the US, that would be against the principle of separation of state and church, which is a lot more prevalent here than it is in Germany. I'm pretty sure that I had 2 or 3 periods of religion class per week from elementary school all the way up to 12th grade, which I will say is way too much in my opinion. I think that time could be used a lot better. I personally attended the Protestant religion class, even though I'm not baptized, but there was also a Catholic class at my school, as well as an ethics class for kids who didn't want to attend either of them. Some schools also offer Islamic, Jewish, or other religion classes. Now, while I personally believe that religion should be something that's practiced outside of school in Germany, I do think that things like ethics classes where people learn about different religions, but also talk about philosophy a lot, should stay. We did talk about those things in religion class too a little, but you know, the main focus was different. Besides religious private schools, Konfessionsschulen, it's also common for bilingual or international schools to be private in Germany, as well as alternative school models such as Montessori or Waldorf schools. The last point I want to talk about is how the school system is organized within the countries. As I mentioned at the beginning, the education system is organized on a state level in Germany. We have 16 states called Bundesländer, and each Bundesland gets to make its own laws and regulations regarding the education of teachers, the setup of the different school types, the curriculum, and the laws regarding how many years kids are required to be in school for. So basically, we have 16 different school systems in Germany, which I'm personally not a huge fan of because, for one, it isn't very economic, but it also makes it pretty hard for both students and teachers to move around the country. When families move to another state in Germany, their kids often struggle with adapting to the new school system there, and in a lot of cases they have to make sure to catch up on a second language or another subject. Now, as I just mentioned, one of the things that the states decide on is the Schulpflicht in Germany, the compulsory schooling that says that every kid has to go to school for a certain amount of years. In Bavaria, where I'm from, it's 9 years for K-12 schools, but even afterwards, all kids in Germany have to attend some type of school up to their 18th birthday, but that can also be a vocational school, for example. This means that in Germany, kids are legally required to attend an actual school, whereas in the US, homeschooling is a lawful alternative that parents can consider as well. So even though the US does have compulsory education laws, they're not compulsory schooling. Now, how is the school system set up within the US? Many things are regulated on the state levels, just like in Germany, but below that there are school districts. Even the non-Americans among you might have heard of families picking their new home based on which school districts are the best, or you might have also heard about redlining in a political context. School districts are geographic areas that function as a government entity for public school matters, with a so-called school board being at the top of the hierarchy. Every school district contains one or several schools, and the school district doesn't only play a role when it comes to decisions regarding the setup of the school, but also when it comes to funding and which students attend the school. The funding of public schools in the US typically consists of 13% coming from the federal government, 43% coming from the states, and 44%, so the majority, coming from local governments. The local governments, on the other hand, rely mostly on property taxes to support public education, which means that property-rich areas tend to collect more in property taxes, and therefore schools that are located in wealthier areas usually get more money than schools that are located in poorer school districts. It would be too much to go into detail about this, but as you guys might know, there's a lot of criticism about this, because over time, it obviously means that poor communities don't get the same opportunities and quality of education as wealthier communities, which then reinforces the socioeconomic divisions even more. In Germany, schools are run and funded by the general regional entities, which, as I've mentioned, are usually the states of Germany or the municipalities. School districts in the meaning of distinct legal entities do not exist in Germany, and with that, there's also no regulation as to which public school students have to attend after elementary school. So for elementary school, Germans do attend the school that is closest to where they live, but after that, people usually pick their school based on what focus the school offers or other factors, but it might actually be on the other side of the city, which is why starting in 5th grade, you'll see a lot of German kids take public transportation all over the place to get to and back from school, or they just take their bike like I did every day. We don't really have school buses like they exist in the US, and kids are a lot more independent in Germany in that regard, but I'll be talking more about that in the next video, where I'll focus more on the day-to-day differences at school, including how the classes are set up, extracurriculars, school sports, things like prom, the differences in how strict and challenging the schools are, and more. So definitely make sure to subscribe and activate the bell so that you get notified whenever I upload part 2. Thank you so much for watching this video until here. I hope you guys found it interesting, and again, I know that education varies a lot throughout both countries, and I'm sure there are a lot of exceptions to what I said and aspects that I wasn't really able to include into this video, so please feel free to add things in the comments below and share your personal opinions and experiences. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, follow me on social media, and support my channel on Patreon and buy me a coffee if you want to. And with that, I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!